Hey, first period. Happy Friday. Sorry I'm not there to start us out. Miss Cadelli's here though, and hopefully y'all just watched the student news and seen, kind of check out what's going on around the world. Okay, so we've been talking about the United States as an imperial power, and let's continue looking at that just a little bit more in depth. So, a little bit of review of our foreign policy. America and the world is one of our themes for APUSH. And don't forget what we've already been exposed to. We've talked about George Washington, and he saw a lot of conflict between Britain and France. As America's first president, he warned us, like, be careful, proclaim neutrality, stay out of it. Of course, we did not listen to much of what he had to say. But nonetheless, that was definitely something, American foreign policy right off the get-go was something that we were going to have to kind of struggle with. And then you've got Adams, Jefferson, and Madison, the XYZ affair, that quasi-war under John Adams' presidency, Jefferson being faced with the impressment of our soldiers, initiating an embargo act that we definitely were not ready for economically, and then Madison's little war, the War of 1812, which is known as the Second War for Independence. Okay, and of course James Monroe, that Monroe Doctrine, that is very much all bark and no bite at this point in time, meaning that we didn't really have anything to substantiate. We didn't have anything to really guard against the words of the Monroe Doctrine, which warned the European powers to stay out of our neck of the woods, which would be the Western Hemisphere, and especially Latin America. Okay, now let us not forget motivations for imperial growth. You know, take a look here. World history. You gotta recall everything you learned in world history. Cadelli's a world history teacher, but what's going on in this picture? What nations are represented by these caricatures? You've probably seen this before. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and you guys can talk about what is going on here and how does this affect America's stance? Go ahead and pause it. Okay, so America wanted to be a part of the game. It's definitely something, if you're going to compete in the world, you need to be ready to play the game. And our motivations can be broken back down to those three G's. We looked at the three G's with motivations for colonialization, and even exploration, and they're the same concepts that apply to imperialism. We are looking in terms of economic gold, okay, not actual yellow gold per se, but looking for an economic base for new markets. We demanded new resources, and at some point we're going to demand free, or not free, but cheap labor, okay? When we talk about glory, we're definitely talking about military and political glory. Being able to compete globally, militarily. Alfred T. Mahan, I don't know if y'all remember him, but he was the man who wrote the book about sea power, and really talked about the need and the requirement for a strong naval power. And that's going to be huge. And we will see very soon, especially under Teddy Roosevelt, gunboat diplomacy, where we will speak softly, but we will carry our big stick, and our big stick will be our Navy and our military. Okay. Of course, nationalism is going to be a huge part of the glory aspect. And a term known as jingoism. This may be new for y'all. You may want to write this down, but jingoism, kids, is extreme patriotism, especially in the form of aggressive or warlike foreign policy. So again, the term is jingoism. It's something you should know, you may come across, and it is aggressive or warlike foreign policy. And of course, we talked about the Frederick Jackson Turner thesis, where he talked about the frontier was closed and there is no more plan B. All right. God is going to play a huge role from a philosophical and religious standpoint. Josiah Strong is one who will assert the idea of Anglo-Saxon superiority. Rudyard Kipling, which you will be reading his poem, White Man's Burden. This poem was actually written in 1899 because of the U.S. policies with the Philippines after the Spanish-American War. So we're going to come back to that. And then, of course, Herbert Spencer was an advocate of social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. We were able to go from sea to can't ever say it, sea to shining sea because we were supposed to. We were the fittest, is kind of the idea there. Okay. And now economically, at this point, I do want to kind of state that, we have started to invest in foreign markets at the end of the 1800s, and we have seen exports just skyrocket. And this is good. This is good for us. So keep that in mind, especially as we get closer to worldwide depression coming up. So America becomes the economic imperialistic equal of major European powers by the start of the 1900s. How does this happen? Okay. How do we industrialize and urbanize and get to the point where we're rolling with the big kids, essentially? Um, we're equal to major European powers. This is actually really mind-blowing if you stop and think about how quickly this happened. All right. Now, there were several instances. You can look here, several moments of face-offs, I guess you could say, in the late 1800s. The U.S. facing the Germans in Samoa. All right. And that was the time that we split Samoa in half. Then we had the U.S. facing Italy in New Orleans, actually, and we're facing Chile and Canada in the British. We actually have a standoff with the British over gold discoveries in Guyana, down in Latin America. And the dispute was actually between Britain and Venezuela, but the United States gets involved because we stick up for our little sister. And we definitely say that, the Brits were breaking the Monroe Doctrine, and you must get out of here, Britain. So things get super heated, almost to war. But we don't go to war. Why? Well, because of the era of patting the eagle's head is what is this is known. We see, the British have a lot of stuff going on in Europe, kind of a time period where they can't deal with this. They have money. They also have stuff going on in Africa. So there's really just this time period of like, let's just, pat the eagle's head is what it is called. And that is one reason why we do not go to war earlier than what we will be talking about with the Spanish-American War, okay, is because of this time period of patting the eagle's head. Okay, I do want to back up for a minute. Something you learned about in world history. I know that you talked to you guys about Commodore Matthew Perry, but the United States and Japan. We do go into Japan, and I will tell you that we see that Japan is a closed country. Okay, Japan is an interesting country in the fact that they choose to be isolated from everything. The shogun is a military leader in Japan, and they controlled Japan for about 200 years from essentially 1600, 1800s, and they closed the country to outsiders as a way of preserving the culture and other such things. Well, Commodore Matthew Perry is put in place to go and to open Japan up. So he first visits in 1853, and he definitely makes demands like, you must trade with us, and they essentially say no. And then he returns in 54. In 1854, he returns. But this time he shows up with 7 ships, and he's got 4 sailing ships, 3 steamers, 1,600 men. They drop anchor, and the Japanese open up. Okay, essentially, it was definitely the ships he had were a lot more elaborate than what the Japanese had, and so they'd open up, and we open up Japan. Now, this leads to rapid modernization of Japan in the late 1800s, and we say, hey, we want to trade with you. We will industrialize you as quick as possible based on some of our industry that we've had put in place. And so this is something to kind of store in your bank of knowledge, because this is going to come up, especially as we get closer and closer to conflict with the Japanese during World War II. Okay, so please don't forget this. We do sign the treaty in 1854 of Kanagawa, and the Japanese ports are opened up to all U.S. merchants. This is very beneficial, especially for the United States, but for both sides, in all honesty. Like I said, they modernize, and the rate that they modernize and they industrialize is just incredibly swift. So keep that in mind. Okay, it's time to talk about Hawaii, which is known as the crossroads of the Pacific. Hawaii, this beautiful place, is awesome because look at, here it is, crossroads right there, okay? As we're heading off to Japan, heading down to the Samoan Islands, these are major shipping routes, and there you have it. We need Hawaii, okay? We'll see early on the American missionaries do take root. We have Christian churches that establish themselves, and there are Protestant missionary groups, as well as some Catholic, uh, faith or churches, I should say, establish themselves to save some of the people, and especially the lepers that were sent to one island in particular. So there's a lot of missionary work going on in Hawaii fairly early on. But what we see here in 1848, Hawaii becomes an American protectorate. Okay, and by the late 1800s, uh, you know, America really regards Hawaii as an official part of the United States. We had warned other nations, leave it alone, stay away, this is ours. American fruit and sugar companies were definitely set up and totally entrenched in Hawaii. They ran the islands because of economic power. And the population, the indigenous people of Hawaii, one-sixth, it ended up being one-sixth that of the population exists by the late 1800s because of illness that was brought in. So similar story to what we saw with Native Americans. We will see the same thing happening to the indigenous population of Hawaii. There's definitely growing resistance by the Native Hawaiians towards the United States because more and more Americans are coming in. Okay, so what we see with the Hawaiian leaders, they had a monarchy, and there will be something known as the Bayonet Constitution. I'm not even going to attempt his name, okay, because I'll just butcher it. But the Bayonet Constitution that essentially is, hey, look, you will have a constitution, and when we called it a bayonet constitution is because it was like as if it was done by gunpoint because of the force and the power and the influence by the United States. And they put on voter restrictions. They definitely favored big business, Hawaiian big business like Dole. And we see that the king dies in 1891 and his daughter is left to deal with the problems. So I am going to stop this here and start a video about the queen, and her name is Lelukalani, I'm pretty sure. I did not butcher that one, I'm hoping. I probably did though. But she advocates Hawaii for Hawaiians, and she definitely tries to repeal the Constitution, and sadly she does get overthrown. So there's a nice little snippet, a nice little video I want to show you about this. And Hawaii is a place that Grover Cleveland will have a really hard time with Hawaii and how it's dealt with. He feels pretty bad about it. But others do not. They definitely feel like, hey, this is ours, this is the way it's supposed to be, and they assert a lot of control. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this here, and then we'll get started on the video about the Queen.